We're going to call to order the regular meeting of the, I almost said CJ, Wilton Board of Education.
I was wishing people good morning, so I'm with you.
Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. At this point, are there any members of the public who would like to come forward and offer any comments? No, seeing no one, thank you. There'll be an opportunity at the end of the meeting if you, the spirit moves you. Consent agenda. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the consent agenda?
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda is approved. Moving on to the board chair's report. I'd like to first thank the Wilton Go Green Committee for providing the board with these wonderful water bottles, which will go to use. We heard a few weeks ago from project organizers Heather Priest and Tammy Thornton about the great sustainability efforts underway in each of our schools, which so far, Middlebrook alone has resulted in 11 tons of garbage being diverted to recycling or composting. And second, I want to remind the community, although you may not be hearing about it, the school budget process never ends. We won't see Superintendent Smith's proposed budget for a few months, but please know that the budget building process is well underway. A key component of that will be input from the public. So we are scheduling a budget conversation for Thursday evening, November 8th, from 6:30 to 7:30 here in the high school library. And believe it or not, that's less than a month away. So I know November sounds like it's a long way off. I really encourage all members of the community who have an interest in the budget process to attend. It's so important that community voices are heard as we build the budget. And that evening will offer an excellent opportunity for community members to meet with members of the board and also with members of the administration. With that,
Right here in this room, right?
I think it's
Oh, out there, okay.
yeah, we have the budget, the community workshop out there, and then our regular Board of Ed meeting will follow right after at 7:30 that night, not 7 o'clock, 7:30. So we'll be out there at 6:30 and then here at 7:30.
November 7th, so when?
Superintendent's report.
November 8th.
November 8th.
So, a number of things. I just shared with Chris that we learned today that the board earned 2 more CABE Bonnie B. Carney Awards for Excellence in Educational Communications. Right, we're gonna need a bigger wall. The first was for our budget book, and the second was an honorable mention for our infographic. So when we go to CABE in November, we'll pick up those awards.
What was it about the budget book? Was it the numbers in the book?
It was the gestalt of the book.
The whole
Experience.
The whole, and one person actually read it at CABE and saw fit to give us an award, right?
well deserved,
Mhm.
as the author of that book.
So earlier this week, I spent most of my day between Miller Driscoll and Sutter Mill. We do, as you may know, we carve out in our calendar, we call them coaching days, where all of the administrators are out in classrooms, working teachers, central office administrators are in the buildings, working with building administrators and teachers as well. So I just want to describe a couple of examples of that really capture our efforts at promoting both social emotional learning as well as academic achievement. So I started my morning with Ms. Kuhn in Diane Nelson's class at Miller Driscoll. As part of Diane's morning routine, students participate in a morning meeting, which is circle time. And so on this particular morning, Diane had every child in turn turn to their neighbor and say, "How are you feeling today, Chris?" And then Chris would say, "I'm feeling." "How are you feeling today?"
It's great.
"Great." And then Chris would turn to Glenn and ask Glenn how he was feeling. And it sounds simple and it sounds kind of silly, but it was actually really important. And it was important for a few reasons. Number one, kids had an opportunity to think about how they're actually feeling, which is part of the exploration work that we're doing with adults around Ruler. But it also gave kids an opportunity to look at each other, to talk to each other, to listen and to be heard, and really for the teacher to set a really warm engaging tone for the rest of the day. And then she used a little bit of time to set up some of the literacy work they were going to do. It was powerful. So following that, we marched on down the hall to the cafeteria and attended the first empathy assembly with about a quarter of the school. And so during this, Ms. Kuhn attempted faithfully to capture the attention of 200 or so 6 and 7-year-olds, so she could tell them all about the Let Grow homework that their parents were going to get. So part of that project, as you heard at the last board meeting, was that we want kids to have more independence experiences. So parents are receiving a list, and they're encouraged to let their children try something new, and then they take a picture of it, report back, and slowly over time we're going to build a book to capture all these experiences and really try to tend to promoting independence that way. They also heard from our fabulous school counselor, Elena White, who introduced empathy as the topic of the month, and the students and teachers will be engaging in a variety of activities to teach that very important skill. It was great. We then went on to some classrooms, and so what we saw, we were in a kindergarten classroom, we saw a special educator working with a small group, and we were in, was it 2 kindergarten classrooms, or was Pam's, is she first grade?
Yeah,
Kindergarten. So they were. It was in the morning, and so they were involved in their literacy activities. But in addition to seeing some really good word work, we also saw one of our instructional coaches modeling a lesson in a classroom for a teacher, and that's a practice that's embedded in our culture, and wonderful for kids, wonderful for staff. So my day started off pretty well, and then it was kind of like The Price is Right. It just gets better and better and better. So on to Cider Mill. I started with Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Falcone, where she was doing some pretty heavy-duty problem solving with some of her colleagues around ensuring that all of our students who need the right attention get the right attention. We left her office and then went around and visited a number of classrooms. So there too, students were engaged in all kinds of literacy activities. We were in Trish Howell's class, thank you. And they were at the rug. She was doing a really cool activity trying to take a concept that's really abstract, and make it concrete for them. But when they transitioned back to their desks and were working in their independent reading books, I sat down with a young lady and said, "So what are you doing?"
Oh, I saw some.
Metacognition. I'm sorry. I said, "Excuse me, meta what are you doing?" And she says, "Metacognition. You know, when you think about your thinking."
Oh.
And so I said, "Please tell me more."
What grade is this?
So 5th grade, right? So you
That's
just can't make this up, right? This is unbelievable. So Chloe says, "I'm thinking about my thinking. So I'm reading a book, and I'm thinking about what I think about this book, because it helps me to understand it better." I just left. I thought, all right, we're done. Good job.
And on his
with that,
Twitter, it was
right?
hashtag mind blown.
It was just so impressive.
He put that on his
So
Twitter feed,
impressive.
that story, yeah.
Right.
Hashtag
So,
mind blown.
we were just kind of passing around through some other classrooms. We were in another classroom where, again, kids were, the majority of the class was engaged with independent reading, and the teacher was working one-on-one with a kid in the back room, and trying to provide some goal setting and some feedback based on the reading passage that the kid had done in front of the teacher. And then in a third classroom that we visited, there was another instructional coach engaged modeling a lesson for a teacher in a small group. So again, and this is just, as good a practice as you want to see in a classroom. And so I left feeling about as good as I've ever left a classroom or a school, for that matter, and was thinking, all right, when we talk about personalizing instruction and talk about modifying the environment so we can personalize instruction, these are all examples of that effort, and they're different and they're varied by grade level, but when we think about what our big educational objectives are, that's one of them, and we just see it. We see it every day. These guys see it a lot more than I do, but some really fabulous examples of that. And then in the spirit of The Price is Right, because my day couldn't get any better, but it did, I ended at the high school college fair. which
Oh,
was,
awesome.
yeah, hats off to Christine Collins and our school counselors. Every year they do a phenomenal job. I was, just before it started, the high school rolls out the red carpet and they do this really great dinner for the visiting college reps, and they have a chance to network. Our school counselors have a chance to get to know them. And so at least one that I was sitting with said, you know, we come to this every year, and you know, every year I meet a kid here, and I remember when I see their application, and I accept them because of my interaction with them based on this event. And I'm quite sure the school counselors all kind of affirm that experience, say, yep, that happens quite a bit. So, again, you just can't, you know, understate that personal connection that kids have an opportunity to make when we bring in so many different admissions reps from so many great schools. I will tell you, for the record, I did approach Notre Dame, and I was unsuccessful in getting early admission for my fourth grader.
Oh,
But not for lack of
that
trying.
would've been
And,
early.
You know, I'll be looking for them
Just keep
next
going
year.
back every year.
So, I think I'll bring him next year and
That's
just
right, keep
plant him in
him
front of the
He
table.
already knows that's where he wants to go.
So,
I guess
so that's my report.
That's very funny.
How many schools go to that?
Oh, a couple
There's
hundred.
a ton.
I'll give you the data in a second. Christine something.
What?
It was well attended, well represented. You know what it's like when, if you've been there, when those doors open up right at 7 o'clock and the droves come in, and then you have these further waves of students both from Ridgefield and from the high school. So I'll see if she sent the exact data out, but based on my observation, there were a lot of people there from Ridgefield and Wilton.
Yeah,
It's
100
good showing.
colleges maybe? Yeah, I mean, there was a fair
Yeah, I'll
number.
see what she sent.
And that's Christine's message to the kids throughout the year when the college reps come in. These are the people who will be reading your applications. They make the connection, you know, get in here and you come and take your toga off. That's one of her rules, no togas when you meet with your rep. Well, that was like a day in Wilton, a day in the life.
It was great.
That was a nice day.
You want the data?
Sure?
It's right here. It is pretty impressive. 198 colleges, universities, and gap year. Military also participated. 1,340 guests, 220 plus reps, 10 high school student guides, 10 Ridgefield High School student guides, 10 Wilton High School PTSA College Center parent volunteers. We had the parents there. 7 parent volunteers, afternoon in the field house setting up. Full throttle here. 2 police officers, 4 shuttle buses, all 9 Ridgefield High School and Wilton High School counselors. So
No parking
very
spaces.
collaborative.
Zero parking,
Yeah,
right.
0 parking.
Oh, I know, it's a labor of love for Christine though. She just,
And as always, she said at the end, I am an amazing college career counselor as a center coordinator.
Agreed.
agreed. Yeah, and I bet about a dozen of those college reps were probably in today talking to our students.
Yeah.
Cause they spend the
They're
night
here.
and
Mhm.
they come in. Good stuff. Committee reports, teaching and learning, you guys went this week, didn't you?
Yes, we did. It was a busy meeting, full agenda. First, we got some updates on different things. A group was in from Middlebrook, led by Janet Nobles, gave us an update on Web Crew, which is the Where Everyone Belongs crew, similar to what the high school does with its Link Crew. They're now doing at Middlebrook and gave fabulous feedback on the program, and now word is spreading through the school. I mean, you could speak to it better than I can, that more and more kids want to get involved, and it helps transition the incoming 6th graders to the middle school environment. So that was fun to watch that. And then the Link Crew, Deb and Pam gave an update on that, as well as now we're into our 3rd year of flight already.
Wow.
So the first flight kids are juniors now. So I was asking about what's the feedback from the counselors as to how this is, and they said that they've starting to see where the kids are more engaged with using Naviance more, and one of the feedback that they gave us was that the kids feels that they understand more about course selection and how to do that. So very positive stuff, so all good stuff. Then we did our preliminary review of 4 different 6141s, which you know is the proposal for new courses. So that will all come to the board table soon. US history, another advanced computer science class, an executive functioning class being proposed, as well as a peer leadership training course where, the peer benching group, which is now an after-school activity, they're putting together a proposal to bring that as an in-classroom class to even better prepare the kids. So that was interesting. And then we had a very preliminary discussion about our honor roll at the high school. And it's something that we're gonna take a look at over the course of the year. Because as Bob cautioned that, since the year has already started and it's already in place, we're certainly not gonna make any changes to it this year, but we're just asking questions about it. Are the requirements right? Are we doing it at the right times of the year? Should we even have one or not? So we'll be exploring that over the course of the year, and we'll give you updates along the way. And that was teaching and learning.
Great, thank you. Business ops?
Yes, we met this morning. Not everyone was able to attend, but in the data metric gathering project, there's been a huge leap forward in that not only some data sources have been identified, data types have been identified, but now they're starting, the staff, thanks to Dr. Smith and his team, are starting to populate the different fields and go over time. And so it's a fascinating set of data that right now is pretty dense. And we talked a little bit about how to make it a little bit more user-friendly and do some highlighting, but just a giant step forward on that project, and I think it will stand us in good stead during the budget cycle.
Are you working just with Wilton data, or are you doing like comparative?
There's Wilton data, and then there's also lots of comparative data to the DIRG.
Oh, that's
So,
a lot.
yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
Good stuff.
Yep.
Very good. All right, thank you. Glenn, do you have anything to add? Okay.
I have something to add.
Oh, sorry.
Since I'm on the Business Ops Committee, I'm also on that Wilton Taxpayer Survey
Yes.
Subcommittee, and that has now gone live.
Oh, good.
And so all Wilton residents, Wilton taxpayers, are encouraged to take it. It's www.wiltontaxpayer.com.
Okay, has
and
that been announced to the public?
There's a press release that just is going out.
Great.
So
Sounds
we
good, yes.
encourage all parents, all residents, all board members, all staff who live in town, any Wilton taxpayer, to go online and take the survey. It takes about 10 minutes. It's adaptive, so depending on your answer to a certain question, it will calibrate what your next question will be. And it really is sponsored by the Board of Finance in an effort to find out what Wilton taxpayer priorities are and how, in general, people feel about where money is being spent and where it ought to be spent and what needs a little bit more or what needs a little bit less or what doesn't need anything. So it will inform, the original intent, if you remember, was because there tends to be a pretty small voter turnout rate, that sometimes the Board of Finance is doing a little bit of guesswork as to what the most Wilton residents think. So this will be some helpful information.
Is there a deadline for that? Like when will
You know what, I will get the when
Okay.
it ends, but I know it's up for
Okay.
several weeks. So, but that doesn't mean don't take it as soon as you can.
Is there any issue with us blasting it out through school messenger?
That's what I was putting the note down.
Oh, okay,
Or we could
let
link it to our
me, I don't
website.
think there will be, but let me double check with Richard Creeth and I can get you the press release that is the
That'd be great.
official one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is it gonna be on the website, the link? Or on the town website, or? I
I'm
mean,
sure it's on the town website and I don't know if we can put it, I mean, I'm sure we can put it on ours, but
Okay.
I'll double check all of that.
Because it does have a thing that you could only, each email or whatever can only answer it once, right? Or, I mean, you can't take it multiple times,
Let's hope not.
somehow.
Right,
That's
right,
fair.
there's some
something in
sort
there
of
about that.
security
Okay.
on it, but it's not a huge, I mean, it's common sense stuff
Mhm.
without getting into intricate cyber security,
Okay,
firewalls and all of that.
Stuff,
It's a
okay.
little bit less than that, but there's some common sense things in place.
Great. Policy?
Well, we met on Tuesday and reviewed a few more policies. I think that, Dr. Smith has got a couple that we'll be bringing to the table next month.
Restraints inclusion, administration of
Fingerprinting.
medicines, fingerprinting, background checks,
All the fun ones.
Lots of good
all the
stuff.
Yeah.
fun ones, right.
Yeah,
all fun
so,
and exciting.
So we'll have a couple of things for review and discuss at our next meeting. And then, yeah, an ongoing process. And then we'll go to CAVE and get a whole new list of things that we're not in compliance with. Moving on to review and discuss the building action plans. I'll
Great.
highlight over here.
So, we're gonna invite our principals to come forward. You received in your board packet, just a copy of the scorecard, and then the summary of the proposed targets. And in turn, beginning with Dr. O'Donnell, each of our principals will review their goals for the year, their targets, and then their action steps and plans and how they intend to achieve them. And we'll just work from high school to Miller Driscoll.
Backwards this time.
Good evening, we're honored to present our action plans this evening. I get to go first for a change. Is that unusual? Let me see what you're gonna see first here, so, okay, the action plan. Okay. So the Wilton High School action plan, and I'm hoping you can see it up there. So we have a theory of action that is actually the district theory of action, and I believe you're gonna see that Middlebrook has the exact same one and is using the exact same one. And it centers on high-quality classroom assessments, engagement and inquiry and problem solving, and then instructional plans to meet the needs of all students, a la personalization. We also developed a second action plan, and when I say we, I mean I and Kim Zemo and Jim Hunter, our civic and social ILs around connectedness, which is our school climate goal this year. So what we want to do there is to work to specifically identify the students who are not connected to an adult. We're going to try to get very surgical this year and really identify them. We've had anywhere between 67 to 71% of students who said they are connected, which suggests that approximately 30% are not, which is unacceptable. So we're going to work on identifying them. Then we want to work with the students and have them define connectedness and identify the strategies that adults are using effectively to work with them. And we're actually going to start that at the Student Senate next Thursday when we do a focus group with them. So that's the second part of the theory of action. Once we do so, we want to share that information with the adults and have them implement it so that we're building more connections, because our data continue to suggest that the adults feel as if they're very connected and the students feel as if they and the adults are less connected. So that's our theory of action. You'll see that we have three essential questions. The first two are the academic ones about supporting the teachers and preparing the students with the Connecticut SAT. And the third one, again, is about connectedness. So regarding our goals, we're looking to move the percentage of meeting the benchmark on math from 73 to 78. And we are seeking to move the percentage on EBRW from 89 to 94. Those data are based on analyses of that particular cohort's PSAT performance. So that's very much on par with where we would expect those students to perform. And those are nice increases from where we are this year. So those are our targets. And then in climate, we're looking to raise the student connectedness score from 67 to 75, which is pretty aggressive based on our experiences so far with that survey. But this year, as you may know, we in Middlebrook are going to focus specifically on the connectedness question. So that's going to be a singular focus for us, in addition to all the other school climate initiatives, which we, of course, are undertaking. Talking about a few of the highlights of the action steps, and I specifically put math first here, so hopefully you can see that math is our first goal here. And one of the themes I think you'll hear in terms of articulation across the buildings is the quality work that is going around in IETs, collaborating, implementing protocols, examining student work. So that's our first action step. We have already implemented common planning time in mathematics for Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. So that action step is already in place, which is going to help our teachers collaborate. I actually witnessed that in a math IET yesterday, and the power of the collaboration with the teachers. We have increased our support for Level 1 students and Level 1 teachers. A very high percentage of the students at Wilton High School who are not meeting benchmark are Level 1 students, some 60%. So we have special education teachers now and paras who are co-teaching with our math teachers to try to ensure personalization, that we're really focusing on student goals. Students will be setting goals around SAT achievement, so we think that with a couple of quality educators in the room, we're going to see better results. Then, of course, the analysis of the data to identify students who did not meet the math benchmark. I witnessed that yesterday again in the math IET, where the teachers had color-coded charts where they were able to see the students who were already meeting benchmarks, students who were in yellow who were goal huggers. So these teachers in Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 were working together to work on strategies in the context of our evaluation plan. We call them IAGDs, Indicators of Academic Growth and Development, to set targets for teacher and student improvement. So that's a big part of the process there. But both math and English, of course, are incorporating SAT-like experiences into the regular curriculum, so it's not a discrete test prep block right before the test, but rather the daily rigorous experiences that we want our students to experience in rigorous Common Core aligned mathematics experiences. And that speaks largely to mathematics. English and evidence-based reading and writing, we've made some tweaks to our approach. We've been relatively successful over the years. You'll recall a couple years ago we were number 1 in the DIRG. Last year, in the context of the DIRG, we did slip a little bit in terms of the cohort of students. So some of what we're doing again is just really doing deep analyses of the data, and of course now we have these benchmark assessments and more longitudinal data with the PSAT, so we can analyze PSAT results and really drill down into those, which is part of what the teachers were doing yesterday actually with last year's spring administration and those results. The teachers are designing local benchmarks so they can use those assessments to inform, kind of as formative assessments, to inform regular daily instruction in English and in social studies, because the social studies teachers are very much responsible for our performance in that area as well. Creating a toolkit where teachers can work on designing very much DBQs, document-based questions that are very similar to those that are on the SAT, so the students are experiencing these questions on a regular basis, are growing accustomed to them, and are getting regular feedback from the teachers on how they're performing on those questions is important as well. We have some training in place now for the co-teaching model in English and social studies, which is I think really going to help both the regular education teachers and the special educators. Quality relationships between teachers over years, where they can really work to develop the synergy of a really good co-teaching team is what we're trying to build. And then again, just building these SAT-like experiences into the regular curriculum in social studies and English, and we think that will be successful. And then again, the IET work. So shifting to the school climate goal, again, this is around student connectedness. So our action steps, these student focus groups will start next week already with the Student Senate, which is next Thursday. So Kim is going to go in under the guidance also of Jean Bray and Christina Harvey, who are the supervisors, who are the advisors. And we're going to be asking the question of the students, what does connectedness mean to you? What can our instructors do to better connect? What are strategies that you would like the teachers to know? Okay, so we'll glean more feedback from that. It's important to note that we're not just going to do that with the Student Senate, which is actually a more representative body of the students right now. But we want to also find students who we feel may be disaffected, maybe disengaged, and really get a sense for what they feel connectedness means. So we have a broader definition and maybe some broader strategies. What we want to do this year, and I think it will be more palpable to the students, and I think we'll get a better response rate, rather than that huge survey that the students have been taking. We in Middlebrook are going to be administering these connectedness questions. We at the high school, rather than doing it at advisory, we're going to try to do so in English classes where all students take it, and we want to get a higher response rate and get really, I've set the benchmark here in where we want to go. But after doing this pre-assessment, which we're going to do in November, as you can see in the action step, we may tweak that depending on the data that we get. It may be a little higher, maybe a little lower, we're not sure. But it'll be interesting to see a pre-assessment, and then we're going to do the post-assessment again at the end of the year, but not quite at the very end of the year when the students are not quite at the end of June when we feel it might be a little bit too late. So Action steps, again, just providing teachers with these strategies. I envision quality conversations around the feedback from the students, maybe even having students report out to the faculty. This is what we want to see in terms of connecting this. This is what works for us. This is what is not working, and do some of that work in faculty meetings and in PD sessions, and then have the teachers implement that. We did also put in here, and I know Middlebrook did as well, and I think you're already aware of it, we are beginning to explore and implement Ruler, so we think that's going to be effective in terms of school climate, initially with adults and then also with students. So, that's a good summary of our plan and our action steps, and we've got a good team of educators that, compiled them and put them together, and we're excited about the school year and looking forward to helping our kids achieve them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob, both you and Dr. Smith referenced Ruler. Could you just explain what it is for?
Yeah, well, it's essentially a social emotional learning. You can call it a program. We had the keynote address with the gentleman from Yale, Dr. Mark Brackett, presented. So what we're doing right now in terms of the steps, and we began really, start with the district leadership team. We began to comprise our charter, which is our charter to guide how we work and how we implement Ruler. And we actually, during the PD day this week, we worked with our faculty. We had a team comprised of Don Shells and Jim Hunter and Kim Zemo and some others to lead us through beginning to essentially really architect and design a charter that will work for Wilton High School. So we had our teachers in interdisciplinary groups, and we began to identify along these strands what's important to them. So, we're beginning to explore it. I think the other schools as well began to do that part of it. And then we're going to work on the mood meter and the meta moment. So, we're in the initial exploration phases, but I would say this, I think there's some enthusiasm among many of the staff and faculty around how this, first of all, can work for adults, and, perhaps most importantly, how it can have an impact on school climate and culture in our school. And some others went actually to the training at Yale. Anybody want to weigh in? That's my summary.
Thank you. Questions?
And what is the Student Senate? What is that?
The Student Senate is, we used to do it just once a year at the end of the year. And it used to be really more students in official capacities, so we've tried to make it a little bit more diverse. And essentially what you have student government usually leading it, so Ava Kaplan will have her first opportunity to lead the Senate on Thursday. And they gather during the lunch waves, and it's a large group of students. You have leaders from clubs and activities, you have some leaders and captains from teams, you have leaders in the school community, and then other students that we invite. And it's an opportunity for the students to take some leadership around usually any and all issues that confront them in the school and in which they're interested. So it's usually a pretty powerful experience. I think our student body presidents have done a good job leading it over the years and facilitating it. And then what you want is you want some positive outcomes and some action steps. So I can give you a couple of examples. And one of the things that came out was, this is just a little example of what feeds kids. And you'll recall that students were very disgruntled about having to make up all of their PE classes when they missed them. So it came out of the Student Senate, and we thought, why don't we just find some middle ground where we can only make them make up a few of them. The first three are, freebies, so to speak. So there's an example where sometimes it's the little things where it's not really a concession, it's listening to students, realizing that their days are so heavily prescribed and they're so busy that, when we said, you don't have to make up the first three, that was an example really of something actionable where they said, we were listened to, we appreciate it, takes pressure off us. So there are some good outcomes to it.
And it's a full day event? Or?
No, it's not. They usually gather, essentially throughout a lunch wave. We get a lot of pizzas, and they eat a lot of pizza, and it's been powerful. I think it's been more powerful again. That's a little bit more diverse, and we're doing it at least a couple times a year now. So it's a good experience. It's a good leadership experience for the students.
Do the senators have to be elected, or how are they chosen?
Well, yeah, some are elective in official capacities. You have your student government there and the members of your exec board. But there are also students that we've tapped to say, would you like to be involved? Again, we've tried to make it a little more diverse. I think at one point, as I think back, it used to be like all the team captains And that's not the case anymore, you know, it's a little bit different in terms of, you know, pulling the cross-section of the students together. I'll have to get an exact update of how they're doing it this year, but it's coming right up, and, you know, I think it's good for our kids, I think it's good for our school, and I hope some good outcomes, we'll achieve some good outcomes.
Good.
I had a question, a couple of them about you referenced the SAT quite frequently, which is
Yeah.
great. I know it's a major push, especially now that the state is using it. But is that data fine-tuned enough to give you what you need in terms of specificity for where to improve in either math or writing or English? Or reading, I'm sorry. You know what I
You
mean?
know, yeah.
Sometimes they tend to be global scores,
They
so that's
are.
one question I have.
Yeah, so I think you're right, Mrs. Lowe. It's not outstanding. It's not as granular as you would like. But I think when the teachers, you know, what I observed yesterday in math. So if you picture a group of teachers, and again they had an IET in Algebra 1, one in Geometry, and one in Algebra 2. When they're getting together and they can look at this point in the year, you know, on October 10th or 11th, really look at their students and their individual cohorts and see where the students are. I do think it can be prescriptive enough for them to know where the students currently performed on the PSAT, and we know that the suite of assessments is aligned, and if we believe that can be predictive of SAT performance. So I think it certainly can help, and I think that when teachers look at students and or groups of students and they design their IEGDs in different ways around different cohorts, you know, some may be focusing on what we might call the goal huggers, some may be the students who did not meet benchmark at all. So I think having those data can help inform their instruction. And then I think that having the data over time, again, where you have a couple of benchmark assessments with the PSAT, I think that can be informative as well. But it's not as granular as you would like. You can go onto the website and get into strands and standards, and I witnessed some of that last year in math, so they can do that. And I think that we recently found out that we'll have access to Khan Academy again, and I think that can be helpful to students in terms of, you know, how to help them improve their performance. So it's a step in the right direction.
Okay, and the other question is, you want those meeting either 480 or 530, whatever the scores were for the different subject areas. Any attempt to get, you know, sometimes with the SBAC, you know, you get from level 3 to level 4. Is there any of that kind of notion there, you know, like to get the 550s into the 600 range, or
Yeah.
how do you work that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I will tell you this, that, you know, what we're doing in mathematics is having students set goals, and I think that's going to be helpful. You know, working with the teachers yesterday, you know, they were talking about what's going to be a realistic improvement. It seems like 20 points is somewhat the range that they feel that they can improve from one to the next. So I hope that those conversations will be effective without putting too much pressure on students. You know, we had the debate around, are you trying, I made the point actually, you know, I just wonder about the idea of having them be pressured to achieve a certain number of points. And, you know, some of the teachers pointed out, our students, for better or worse, they seem to know sometimes where they want to go, you know, what the expected SAT score will be. And so I think that will help some of the students in the conversations with teachers. I think if we can achieve that and have these powerful conversations around here's where you are, here's where we hope to go together, meaning the student and the teacher, I think that can be effective.
And I know we're gonna have a math workshop, but I certainly appreciate the emphasis and some of the work around math that you're starting. So I think that's healthy. And then the idea of students defining connectedness, and maybe they'll figure out what the disconnect is between the faculty perception and the kids' perception. I think that's brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
So, thanks.
Anyone else?
I got one comment. There's a theme that goes through all four schools that we'll save till the end. But in the high school, with your comment, particularly as not only math, but primarily in the English and the reading part, the phrase "teach to the test" was a theme that struck me as I read through that we're making adjustments in our curriculum to either have questions made, written, that are in line with the test or not. And I just, I don't know if the question is, are we sacrificing anything in our curriculum that we know is good to spend time developing questions that are test-driven questions to get improvement in test grades?
So I think that we really think about it as teaching with the test in mind, and so being a little bit savvy in terms
Yeah.
of, we want kids to have a flexible skill set that they can apply to novel tasks.
Mhm.
And certainly, one type of novel task that they're gonna encounter are these demands that are placed on them in a standardized testing situation. So certainly, we always wanna be working on the content of the course within the standards that are required of the coursework. But we can frame those questions in such a way that we're using some of the similar vocabulary, some of the similar layout, some of the similar tools that the kids will need to use, just so that it feels comfortable for them.
Okay.
And so certainly we think that we wanna stay far away from the content being test preparation. I think that that's something philosophically that we are unified on.
Okay.
But I do think that we would do our students a disservice if we didn't keep the format and structure and vocabulary of those metrics in mind.
Okay. No, and I understand that. And
Yeah.
it makes, as I read it, it makes sense, I understand, and it can be done. It's not easy to do, but it can be done. But I'm just cautioned that we don't fall into the trap of teaching to the
Yeah.
test at the expense of what we
And I
think
would
we have
say
as
it's
a
not
rich
the only
curriculum.
thing, it's not the only lens that we keep in mind,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So certainly we want them to be able to respond to college level essays and
Yeah.
personal statements that they need to write for other parts of life, right, as job applicants. So I think we look at those challenges that are gonna open doors for our kids and teach with those in mind.
Great, okay.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
My turn. So, Middlebrook, as Bob said, you'll see quite a lot of alignment between the buildings. We are working on the same, problem, the theory of action that Bob shared earlier. And we really, our goals break down into three goals. The first two are about, achievement for all, starting off with a focus on robust reading and writing skills that students can apply to novel challenges with increasing independence. That students will develop robust math skills and strategies that they can apply in novel challenges with increasing independence. And I really think that idea of making those strategies portable, that kids can do things sort of when they encounter them out in the real world is really a focus for us. And we have, as Bob indicated, the same goal that when asked to respond to the statement, I have at least one adult at my school that really cares about me and my education, we're looking for at least 71% of our students to answer in the affirmative. And again, that's something that we've had some really lovely practice around over the last several years, and we're continuing to double down on that and look at where are the gaps that we can enhance. So I'll just walk you through a couple of our action steps, if that's okay. We started the year really with a deep dive in terms of reviewing data. We look at data both for programs over time and for cohorts of students over time. We start that work at the administrative and then leadership level, but we really set teachers up with all of the information that they need to really look carefully at their own performance, the performance of their program over time, and also the performance of the students that they have received. And from that, they move into their goal setting process as individual teachers. A big focus for us this year is around looking at how to best design and leverage assessment, classroom assessment data, classroom assessment vehicles as well. And so we started the year really looking at how we deconstruct the grade level standards, the standards of the course down to their constituent learning targets. And then looking at what kind of learning is required by that learning target. Where we're going from there is the fact that based on the type of learning target, there is more and less efficient and effective ways to gather information about how students are performing on that. So really getting down to what does success look like on each of our student standards at each grade level. What will be part of that work is looking at the vertical articulation of that in terms of making sure that when we teach to this standard in 7th grade, it looks very different. It's picking up and going forward from where we taught to that standard in 6th grade and so on. So that is something that's going on across all of our academic areas, and I shouldn't just say academic, across all of our instructional areas. We continue to have IET weekly. That's something that we're very committed to. part of that time has a real focus on looking at student work samples and on student assessment performance. And so really using the work of our students to drive our planning forward, being responsive to what we see in front of us, and noticing trends in terms of where are places that programmatically we might want to take a look at our approach or the way that we're investing our time to make sure that we're learning from our performance over time. In both humanities and in math science, we benefit from having wonderful coaches with boots on the ground. It's wonderful to see them working with our teachers, both in classrooms and in IET. Our math department is participating as our math departments in the curriculum review cycle. They're going to be reviewing and revising units of study and certainly taking a look at some of the structural aspects, planning forward for Middlebrook. They'll certainly also be participating in unpacking the standards and looking at assessment vehicles as described a few minutes ago. When we take a look at our climate goal around connectedness, our climate team is up and running. We have a new teacher leader of our climate work, Janica Bagassi, who is just a gem and doing wonderful work. We continue, like my colleagues across this, the district, we are engaged in the exploration of ruler as an approach, and I think it really is getting a lot of traction, a lot of very positive buy-in. We have a core group of teachers who are going to study in depth with Ross Green, again, something that we're doing at all of our schools. And maybe specific to Middlebrook, we are trying to get at least a couple of members of each of our teams trained in restorative practices. And the lovely thing about that is while it sounds like we're going off to lots of different trainings that all sort of overlap, the wonderful thing is we're going off to lots of trainings that all interweave. They're approaches that really marry up nicely and restorative practices. Okay, so restorative practices is the concept of our school is a community with lots of little communities within it. And when we are connected as a community, if I take an action that harms the relationship, instead of there being sort of an arbitrary external from on high punishment, I have an opportunity to reflect on why I did what I did, sort of what my thought process was, and the damage that I've done with the decision that I made, which in all likelihood I currently regret. And I have an opportunity to try to take corrective action for the harm that I've done and restore the damage that was done to the community. So sometimes that looks like community service, sometimes that looks like acts of intentional kindness that are apologies of action. Really, restorative practices is it's not primarily about punishment procedure. It's primarily about establishing classroom communities where we respect and care for each other's emotional experience as well as each other's physical safety, and giving kids the opportunity to own fixing something when they break it. They certainly do that with adult facilitation, but I think, and it's never our intention that we're going to move away from sort of a more traditional punishment structure entirely, but it's a layer where it empowers students to really start owning the unpacking and resolution process after something goes wrong. And I think it really dovetails beautifully with this, what the ruler work is going to be in terms of, in order to do that work, you have to be able to notice your own emotional state, and you really have to be able to start to tune into the emotional state of the other people and see, based on my actions and words, what are you thinking and feeling? And if I've done something that has created a dynamic that's negative, then how can I fix that?
Could I weigh in on restorative practice for a second? Restorative practice is one of the key themes in restorative practice, is also a key theme in some of the other work that folks are talking about tonight. And it's teaching a critical skill to kids. And the skill is how to understand the impact my behavior has on others. And when I say behavior, I don't just mean behaviors that are maladaptive, right? So how does what I do, what I say, how I interact in the community affect others around me? That is a critical life skill as they move through not only the grades but into the world. People who do that well You've probably met some, and you've probably met some people who don't do it very well. Right? It's a critical life skill, so the restorative practice is a teaching tool to help teach students that skill in vivo, not from a book or a piece of paper, but from actually reflecting on and understanding how their behavior is impacting their peer group, their teachers, and the community at large. So it is a critical skill building program.
I'd like to think that we are looking at it in a broader sense, not just students, but also the adults in the community.
Oh, sure.
100%.
You can't teach it. You can't really teach restorative practice if you're not,
Practices.
you're also a member of the community,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
We can all look bad sometimes.
Yeah,
And how we restore ourselves into the community is critical.
critical, absolutely. Okay.
It's a really lovely thing to see how these various approaches feed into each other and are really a support to each other. And I think, we're exploring some, we're training small groups and others. We're not trying to, eat the whole elephant at once. But I think that what we're gonna see is a coming together that allows us to put a really pleasing focus on the social and emotional well-being of staff and students. And at the same time, just front load our work in a proactive, positive way, and without really investing more time than we're already spending, it's sometimes needing to be more reactive than we wish.
Is this something, restorative practices, is that something unique to Middlebrook, or
So
was that?
Joanne Freiberg was here and did a training, and I know that we had representation quite a bit from Cider Mill. I'm not sure if we also had some from Miller Driscoll. I think that some of the work of teaching in circles is so naturally what happens at the K2 level anyway.
You break it, you fix it.
Yeah, it's very developmentally, it's always been what early childhood educators do beautifully. That concept of really developing a classroom community is something that when you teach 6 classes a day at the secondary level, some teachers do that just, it's their nature and the way they sort of entered the profession on their own. And for some teachers, this has been a real eye-opening experience. There are some of my teams where only 1 or 2 people were trained last year, and when you walk around, you'll see a tremendous number of Middlebrook classrooms either set up, literally all of the students sit in circle, like their desks are in a circle, or they've created a classroom huddle space where they can be in circles as needed. And you can actually see the impact in the structure of the school. It's a lovely thing to see.
When does this happen during the school? I mean, is it during homeroom, or are there?
So sometimes instruction happens in a circle, and the respectful teaching practices are part of what's establishing the community, right? And just the norms of the classroom. But certainly if there's something going on that if we as a class community feel like this is not going the way we need it to go, we may take a small portion of a class, or even at an extreme case, a whole class, to have like a town hall style meeting and say, let's go back to our norms or our charter, or and say, are we all getting our needs met? And if not, how can we agree to move forward so that we will get our needs met? So I wouldn't say, it's certainly not like a morning meeting where it happens every day. It's more just an approach in terms of being proactively thoughtful about how we set up our expectations as a community, and then being responsive before it gets to be a big deal. You don't have to have some extravagant acting out that rises to the level of an administrator. So.
We've had many of us at the high school been trained as well. We haven't brought it to scale yet, but we went to the training, and it was pretty powerful at Middlebrook, and it was a K-12 group that got trained, and so we've implemented to some extent an advisory, but I think it's fertile ground really for, working with students on behavior and adults.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's an interesting way for us as an administrative team, now that we have all 4 administrators trained, for us to start thinking about having a decision, more than one approach when we are faced with something that's a disciplinary issue. So,
Right.
I didn't mean to go on that long. I will just mention that on our connectedness work we've been doing for several years now, where we ask the kids to identify an adult in the building that they're connected with, and we do follow up with every student who is unable to identify someone. And we also ask, there are questions in that same metric in terms of, we're trying lots of things to connect with you, which ones are really working for you, and what are some things we're not trying that you think we should, questions like that. So we'll continue doing that. We do that in November and then again in the spring. And all of our teams are doing connectedness work as well, that is team specific. specific. Our clubs and activities are actually an area where a lot of our students find their passion and their adult they gel with, which is probably the same in high school. One that's new this year is that we have a committee that's working on planning events, some of which are surprises and some of which are not, that give novel opportunities that are fun for adults and kids to interact together. I will say that the web program, while it's more than anything about connecting 8th graders and 6th graders, I think really contributes also to the overall feeling of connectedness in the building. I think that those 8th graders are having a very connected experience with their coaches who are leading that work, but I also think that having that inter-grade activity, that's not something, because our grades are so big, they're all not together in the lunchroom, things like that. It's very nice to see some of our older students really being empowered in that role, and I think it is going to help overall with the general feeling of connectedness, even though the specific question is about adults.
Yeah, I think that goes to the link crew too at the high school, that, connectedness is not just necessarily to the adults, but to peers and to older students. That's just as powerful, or could be, especially like they have peervention at the high school and those type of programs that all positive in that. So I don't know if that question in our climate survey can be expanded upon in some way.
So I think that since we're not giving the 66 question long survey, that I think we will embed that question in a series, so
Okay.
it's not just so blatantly out by itself.
Right.
And I think that we could tailor some in terms of connectedness to peers. I think that's a great idea.
Question, any additional questions?
Probably some of my questions we could save for the math workshop,
Okay.
but in general, I just wondered how you came upon your math target level.
Yeah.
A couple of questions. One is the percentage of kids taking algebra seems to go down, and that may be the cohort. Is that the explanation?
So I have, every time I presented math data in a meeting like this, mentioned the fact that I do not think that this is a scorecard target that I would endorse. I think that we have a tremendous number of students who are being pushed into overriding into classes that may not actually meet their needs best.
Okay.
And so for me as a building leader, my goal is to have children in the math class that best allows them to grow their math skills to have long-term math success.
Right.
So I do think that we have some cohorts where we've got some ebb and flow in terms of what their strengths and weaknesses are as a group. And certainly I think that comes into play in terms of our target. But I also think that we've taken to going down and speaking to the 5th grade parents in the spring every year and really talking to them about the fact that kids will learn most when they're in a level of math instruction that they can follow and feel empowered in. So I would stand proudly and say we are not trying to rush more kids into our most advanced math classes. Those kids who go into our most accelerated track actually skip content, and they skip content from 6th grade, which is, our experts tell us, the most highly valuable and densely packed set of grade level standards in the Common Core. So that is why I am not aggressively trying to grow that number.
Okay,
That
but
answer your question?
no, it does, and I think, I think there's certainly many fair points to be made,
Yeah.
but it is quite a difference, and I'm not saying we need to go higher, I'm just wondering, so you're saying that kids are overly not ambitious in the tradition, in a horrible sense, but just unrealistically overly something into math,
I think there's
acceleration.
a combination of factors and stakeholders who are overly ambitious.
Okay, got it. And then, my other question is the SBAC meeting goal.
Yes?
And I know that you can't rush it, but on the other hand, every year we're a little frustrated to see our numbers kind of not doing as well as some of our neighboring towns.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering why that percentage, is that a composite? Like last year, or this year, we had like 80% at, it looks like anyway, I could be reading it wrong, 6th grade, and 7th grade was 76%, 8th
Yes.
grade not so much. So
Sure.
why 70%? Is that
Right.
a composite thing or a
And
cohort thing?
we tore ourselves up over this particular number. And really the reason is if you look at that cohort number in 14-15, in terms of meeting goal, it was 57%. In 15-16, it was 54%. In 16-17, it was 59%. So that spike up to 76 was something that we celebrated and we thought was wonderful. But in terms of, if you look at that, and you look at so when you look at the program trend and you look at the overall performance of the cohort, so the two trend lines over time, that was where we came up with the 70%. Now, we certainly talked about, we can do a more ambitious target there. We were looking for a target of what do we think is something that if we work hard towards it, we can achieve. I'm not sure, we can set a more ambitious number, and I would have less sense of certainty that I would be able to come back and report success on it.
Right, and no, I appreciate being straightforward about it, and I
Yeah.
know that we're gonna dig into it more in the math workshop. But I
Yes.
just sort of wanted to raise let's look at the targets we're
Yes.
setting, that's all.
One of the things to, as we're really trying to dig in and looking at our, not only at achievement data, but at growth data and looking at within each of the levels where the kids are falling. And what we see is that cohort, which has historically been putting up numbers in the 50s, had spectacular growth in 7th grade, which is really something we can celebrate. It's a question, I think, of is it sustainable growth in terms of maybe the same trajectory. You know, if you look at the trend line, it's quite a sharp turn. But I'd be happy to talk about it more.
Okay, and then just one more question, it kind of goes to the SAT thing as being sort of a global score and
Yes.
doesn't give you enough specificity. But
Couldn't
then
agree
you,
more.
but then you said the same thing in one of your obstacles or whatever categories. You
Yes.
said the data we were working with is not as specific as we'd like.
It's a
So
blunt
I don't wanna
instrument.
test kids to death, but if we're not using assessments that are
Yes.
providing helpful data,
Yeah.
what's the solution?
So this is the way that we're handling that. We're currently in the process of trying to dig down at each team into the target level. So let's look at the trend of targets where your team, the students in your team last year had relative strengths and relative weaknesses. And then we want to probe that more with an assessment that gives us finer grained data in a quicker turnaround time. So that might be an interim assessment block from the Smarter Balance suite, or that might be even a homegrown assessment, so that we're gonna sort of find the right tree to bark up from the SBA data, but then we're gonna go after it with a different tool. I think we have the PSAT, certainly at some grade levels we're working with the MAP. Our AIM 8th graders also are taking the MAP so that we get the level of data that we need for individual students. And then we're thinking about playing the zone. You know, once we identify areas of weakness, groups of kids with weakness, to put them together and really leverage our resources as intelligently as we can. I think, you know, in that probably our strongest tool in terms of our payoff has been our AIM program, where those kids were putting up 175, 200% growth. And so we're trying to take that same sort of spirit of planfulness and thinking outside the box to our practice going forward. But like we said, it's a multi-year endeavor.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for Lauren? Could you explain when you said teachers will examine student work samples to reflect on how tightly the assessments align to the target standards? Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so we're doing a lot of work in terms of how, I think a lot of it has to do with making sure the rigor of the target skill is where it needs to be to push kids forward at the greatest pace possible. And one of the things that we need to do is really look at, so what tool are we using right now to assess that skill? And look at the trajectory over a 3-year period and make sure that we're longitudinally pushing kids forward. And I think that sometimes we're assessing kids on, we wanna make sure that the assessment reflects the content of the standard at the level of the standard. And so I think that not only do we wanna look at how did the children do on this measure, we also wanna look at the measure and say, how did the measure do on this standard? Because if it's not giving us the information that we need, then we don't wanna waste our time on it on some level, right? A lot of the assessments that you give at the middle school level are very holistic. But we're going in with a specific sort of laser-focused question, and so let's not get distracted by some of the holistic, because this is the important part, right? So we note and we praise kids on the successes that they're having on some of the holistic stuff, but are we really getting the data that we need for what's critical to the content of that course at that grade level, so that we can push the kids forward? And also, I think we want, not only did they, yes or no, in a binary, achieve the outcome, but also, are we getting the information that we need to know what the next level of work is, both for kids who are above the target and who are below the target? So working in a progression, so if you're not meeting it, I have the information that you didn't meet it, but do I have the information of what the next step of your learning would be?
Thank you.
So it's pretty complex work.
Sure, yeah.
We just got a dissertation on assessment science.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's terrific.
And I meant to ask this for Bob too, but, would you have the staff spot into all this? They're on board with changes that are taking place?
So.
Which changes? I mean,
Well, just what you've presented tonight, like
Yeah, well,
the staffs are aware of it?
I would say this, and I probably need to say this. I think we're in a better place with mathematics right now, with our teachers and with our students. I saw some good quality collaboration around what's most important, which is student learning. I went around and talked to a number of teachers today to thank them for the work, and Don's been providing some leadership. And one of the things that I heard, and you know, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I heard from the 2 pre-calc teachers that they feel they've got better prepared students who are in a good position right now in their learning. I was wondering whether when that first cadence of assessment comes around, that 2-week interval, that unit test, whether we were going to hear a few things. I have not heard much yet. I just felt there was better spirit. I feel as if our mathematics teachers have been trying to be proactive and communicate with parents in advance and send a message that we all share the same mission around caring for students and really being deeply interested in their mathematics achievement. So I feel as if I had to say that based on my experience with the department so far. We have a number of school days ahead and a lot of really important students in our care, but I did want to point that out. I think mathematics right now is in a better spot.
Great, thank you.
I think I have been so proud and pleased and happy on behalf of my staff. I think that we're undertaking a book study as a whole school. And you can imagine that we have departments that are tremendously diverse, a music teacher and an art teacher and a math teacher and a science teacher all studying the same book. And the level of the quality of the conversation that they're having is really astounding. And I think that it's that tight loose. There's room in it for every discipline to really do the most important work of their discipline. And I think that the most important thing that they need is time to really do a thorough job of it. And so I'm really committed to giving them as much time as I can possibly muster over the next 2 years for them to engage in this work. And that over that time, while each department is working within what's the critical work of their discipline, we're having these touch points where we're continually cross-pollinating as a staff, because what we need to have is a philosophical alignment so that, yes, this is how our math department works, but how our math department works is under the umbrella of how the school philosophically works. And I could not be more impressed with the, just really, it's a shining example. You all should come and visit when they're doing one of their work sessions. The caliber of their conversation is lovely.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else for Lauren?
Great.
Dr. Falcone?
All right, thank you. So very similar to our secondary friends here, we have 2 theories of action that really center around 3 themes: collaboration and teamwork, the second one being assessment, planning, and focused instruction, and then the third one being school culture and climate. The targets that we set, we do look at both cohort and cross-cohort growth. And without getting too far into it, over the course of 3 to 4 years and looking within cohorts, there's very different achievement levels. And so we set what we felt were SMART goals,
Okay.
which were 82% for our fifth grade ELA baseline. For fifth grade math, 75%. Now, when you look, if you were to look kind of just regular cohort growth, you'll see some of those are quite significant increases we would need to achieve. But when you look cross cohort, they're more feasible. And I can give you much more in-depth analysis of that if you guys would like. I could provide that for Trudy at the board meeting or what have you. Yep. So with that, for our climate score, we decided to really focus on, when you think about our developmentally, our age group, this is where we really want to really instill a sense of voice and agency with our students. And so we took the survey and really tried to pull a certain amount of questions that really provided us data that zeroed in on that theme. And so we said the baseline was at 48%, combining, I think there were 6 different questions that targeted that theme. And we're setting the target for 60%, really focusing a lot of our time and energies on that piece of our school culture and climate. So with that, getting into those 3 themes that I had stated, I'll take you through a couple of the different high leverage strategies that we're focused on. So in the area of collaboration and teamwork, because as the colleagues had mentioned, we're really investigating and exploring the framework of Ruler, which is really focused on the emotional intelligence of the people that we spend our time with, the children, the adults. And so one of the things that my leadership team had brought up to me is that we hadn't done a lot of leadership training, and we know that the one of the biggest impacts that a leader can have is the indication of what kind of emotional intelligence he or she has the capacity for. And so we did a lot of training over the summertime, exploring emotional intelligences and leadership styles. And because my leadership team, what they do is they lead the IETs. And so the IETs being one of the driving forces of the great work that I think is happening in our schools, it's really important that the our leadership team really did some reflecting as to who they are as learners, and they set learning targets for themselves as well. So that work is continuing throughout the year. We're also really, again, heavily focused on just building that culture of building relationships among our staff. I know that sounds funny, but having those breakfasts and the T-shirts, and it's just those little things that like really start your day off. The PTA is also phenomenal with all of the support that they provide, and it's those little things that really bring a community together. So we continue to focus on that. We also are exploring very specifically 4 different tools that are part of the Ruler framework. All of us, I think across the district, created our school, or at least the first draft of our school charter. And we've also done a lot with the mood meter. One of the activities we had done with all of this work we're also doing with play is we came in, our faculty meetings are at the end of the day, and so we did a whole mood meter activity to kind of see what word described kind of what they were feeling like at the end of a full day as they're kind of heading into a faculty meeting. And there was a lot of exhausted and tired and just not a lot of energy. And then we had this whole kind of introduction to play, and we had the whole faculty talking about what they remembered as kids playing and what that felt like and what experiences they had. And then we did the mood meter again, and the words that were used before and after, discussing and remembering what it felt like to be in those experiences was significantly different. People were energized, they were excited, and so just playing around with different feelings and emotions. Moving down to the next section, which is assessment, planning, and focused instruction. This is very similar to a lot of the work that we started last year. Again, very passionate at our school with the IET process and the coaching work. And One of the first strategies you see here is the teacher and student goal setting process. And, one of the best things that we can do that has the biggest impact on student learning is to have them set goals, learning targets, and to provide feedback to drive the learning forward so that students are able to achieve those goals. And so we are spending a lot of time right now in our coaching cycles and during our IETs looking at student writing goals. Additionally, we have a whole process, just like my colleagues do here, about setting SLOs and IAGDs, which Bob talked about, so I won't get into that. We're spending a lot of time, as always, really getting into classrooms. Jen Saravallo and our coaches and the coordinator, Karen, is going around, really looking at, this is probably one of our last years working with Jen, and we're coming to 5-year cycle of working on really implementing the workshop model, and we have made unbelievable growth, and I think our scores demonstrate that growth. And so we're really kind of looking at what's the next level of work for us, and so really getting into classrooms and determining what that work should look like. Going on to the next level of work. You had mentioned, Glenn, you had asked, you noticed that standardized assessments, and I think that, Lauren did a great job. It's not the actual test prep. I'm vehemently against that. It's about the format, the vocabulary, the processes, and making sure that, our students are aware of the kind of language that's on the assessment. And, the fact of the matter is that those assessments measure the standards, and our curriculum is aligned to those standards. And so it's not a stretch to be within the realm of even some content. What's measured on the assessment is character traits, and that's what we see in our curriculum because it is standards-based. So, when I think of test prep, I think of those workbooks that people used to, when you think of CMT world, and we do not have, they're not even allowed in my school. So it's just making sure that the kids are familiar with formats and language. Moving on to my last goal or strategy in that area is it's really looking at math instruction specifically for students with some disabilities, and we're going to be getting in and doing some very specific learning walks and looking at learning progressions and looking at the concrete, the pictorial, and the abstract kind of cornerstone of what Math in Focus is based upon, and how do you leverage that for different strategies that work with different learners. And so I'm doing that work collaboratively with Sharon D'Angelo and Andrea and Chuck and Trudy, as well as our coach Randy. So we're really excited about that. And then finally, the school culture and climate work. We are, again, really focused on Helping Hands being our student leadership team. We have made a little bit of a shift because we felt like maybe the whole school wasn't connected to some of the work, and so this year we do have representatives from every classroom, and they're actually coming, doing an activity, and then taking some of that work back to their classroom, and so we're hoping that the entire school can feel a little more connected to that. I think that thinking about the positive student behaviors, it gets to a lot in that strategy. You'll see community meeting time every day. We have our teachers in building that connectedness with our students. It's morning meeting basically, but depending on a teacher's schedule, they might not do it in the morning, so we just call it community meeting. But it's basically a circle, and you either you're solving a problem, you're getting connected, you're previewing something that's coming up in the learning experience. But it's really a time to be connected and build a relationship with the teacher, among the students, and that happens every day. I think that one of the things that we're trying to do is to just have a lot more movement and to think about the whole well-being for our students. We're doing a lot, as you know, with the play that Miller Driscoll is doing. And I think that I would love if you would make sure that you if you check us out on CM Live, and it's the handle is WPS CM Social, and what we're trying to do through the Twitter handle is really celebrate all of the wonderful things that are going on. I know that yesterday you were there, and we have, no homework because it was the Let Grow project was being introduced, and we just want to make sure that there was time, at home to really focus on that experience. If you look on there, Dr. Smith has been challenged with the floss. I'm not sure if you ever followed up with that dance challenge.
I
and
will if I do.
Go Noodle, and there's just a lot of things that are trying to
Accept.
build community and movement and thinking about whole student well-being. And then, of course, the purposeful play, which I don't think we've spent a lot of time on that. So, lots going on.
Great. Questions, comments?
We'll talk about it more in the math workshop. But I thought it was really strong the way you pointed out, working specifically on trying to figure out a little bit about the gap between students with disabilities and the general ed. And the theme actually is in the other buildings as well, but you sort of took it on head on in terms of labeling it. So, and I know that when we look at performance of students with disabilities and the general education population, that is something that not only our district, but lots of districts need to focus on. So thanks for highlighting it.
Other questions, comments, Virginia? Okay, thank you very much. Last but not least.
All right, I'm so used to going first. And then I just sit back and I watch them all, and I was like, oh. So here we go. We did also at Miller Driscoll yesterday launch the Let Grow project. Sort of
How was
effectively.
that, for both of you, how was that received?
Well, let me just tell you, we gave them 2 weeks. We both gave them 2 weeks to do the project. At our school, we said to the parents, please take a picture and send in a little caption of what your kids have done. One of the first messages we got from a parent was a preschool parent where her daughter came home, wanted to play outside by herself. And so she took a picture and she sent it in, and she was so proud. I brought a cute picture because one of the first grade kids wanted to go out to the chicken coop and gather the eggs alone. And that was the picture, and she was again so proud of herself. And I can't wait to send this to Lenore because I want to go you might have put your kid on a subway, but our kids are like in the chicken coop out here in Wilton. So I mean, come on.
Nothing but good is going to come from
Pictures
this.
of, we kind of have an egg theme going. We had somebody, like one of the kids was cooking eggs, and so already after just the first night, they've sent things in. And the funniest story, sorry, I totally digress when I'm going to be on my plan. But a parent came in today to pick their child up for a doctor's appointment and said, I'm here to get Andrea, to which the secretary said, oh, okay, so did you send a note in to the teacher? And the parent said, well, no, I just told Andrea she should tell her teacher. And so lovely Joyce Healy was like, well, it doesn't work that way. You have to send a note in. And the mom said, I thought you wanted these kids to be writing them down. She should just tell her.
Mom.
In your face,
I was like, well,
Yeah.
right. Secretary came and was like, what are you doing? Well, anyway. Oh, well. It's like, well, that's kind of true. All right, well, back to my plan. So, like last year, we have, again, 2 theories of action that we worked as a leadership team over the summer to do some revisions on. And it was interesting because when we presented this to the staff, we presented the changes in the theories of action and we put them in red. And it's kind of funny because when you just look at the words in red, connect with, responsive, engagement, communication, caring, playful, it's sort of like, wow, that's pretty telling right there. So it was nice, we kind of made some small tweaks, but still around those 2 areas of, academic achievement for all and then school climate. My targets actually got cut off from my plan somehow in the, sharing of the document. I thought maybe it just built some suspense. So my target for 2nd grade for the kids for reading would be that 86% of them will be above the 60th percentile. And for math, it will be 84%. And similar to what my colleague said, we use trend data looking at how they did on the map from kindergarten to first grade and using that to predict for our second grade targets. For culture and climate, one of the most concerning scores for me anyway, our climate data was actually really good, but one score that went down significantly from last year was teachers feeling as though they could meet the needs of the most difficult students. And even though our score, like we rocked our scores last year, they were still feeling like they weren't really meeting the needs of those challenging kids. And so part of our plan, and we'll talk about it later, is to kind of get to the bottom of what is that? Is it, challenges academically? Is it challenges socially or behaviorally? And we do have some data on that. But I do think, again, the kids are very successful, and I want to make sure the teachers feel that way. Our teacher efficacy scores have been really good. And so when that was like kind of a pretty significant drop, that was really concerning. And then our leadership group and our teachers really wanted to focus on the playground because, we just think everybody should be happy on the playground. The kids are pretty happy, and I think the parent scores were kind of around the fact that oftentimes they would say they were unsure, so they weren't sure what their kids were doing on the playground. So we're kind of coming at that from a couple of different angles. So I'm just going to give you some highlights. I'm not going to go through every single piece in my plan, but similar to my colleagues, there's sort of the through line around collaboration, student work and assessment, and then culture and climate. Our biggest thing with collaboration this year was to find our teachers more time to be able to spend together to do some problem solving. So we gave them a dedicated SRBI time that is outside of their weekly IET, and that is focusing a lot on behavior. We also did some probing and had some focus groups within a faculty meeting trying to get to the bottom of, if you're not meeting the needs of challenging students, again, where is that coming from? Is it from an academic perspective or a behavioral, social, emotional? We built in some time for people to reflect on their successes, and last year we did the teacher fair, which we just loved. It was super fun. After they got over the trauma of me telling them we were doing the teacher fair. But this year we're doing something different, and we have a staff spotlight in my weekly need to know that goes out every Monday. And so teachers have been signing up, 3 teachers each week, and we focus on something that they are proud of that they're doing in the classroom. And so I joke around that we just have the teacher fair every week because we have our little staff spotlight. The other piece that we're doing around our collaboration is last year there was a lot around IETs. And this year we are working to have teachers go in and observe other teachers. So they're partnering up to observe each other, maybe if they're in the same coaching cycle. We're also encouraging them to do videos. A lot of them did put that into their goal setting, either observing other teachers or making videos to kind of look, at their own teaching practices. And then we're gonna head up to Cider Mill, our second grade teachers, and we invited some third grade teachers to come see us for that kind of connection. Student work and assessment, we're kind of moving forward. We did a lot around the MAP testing last year and using those results to form small group instruction. We're looking to differentiate the MAP PD, but then also add in how do we use all these other indicators and all of this other assessment data that we have, including data beyond academics, which is sort of what kids are interested in, what they like, their relationships and those things to personalize instruction. And then when we go on to culture and climate, similar to the other schools, we're doing Ruler and Ross Green, same thing. We have our whole Let Grow launch. We do have a positive behavior support committee that's been kind of amazing because the teachers are making decisions around some behavioral things that we're doing. We do have the 3 R's, but we jazzed them up with respect, responsible, and then ready to learn and play together. I know, we just like to play. And we did do a training just this week on morning meeting, and Jen was nice enough to lend us one of her teachers, Jen Ringelheim, who's trained in responsive classroom, who came up and did a session with our teachers, kind of a refresher. But I have to say it's really nice using people in the district. We try to use people within the school or within the district. There is so much expertise here. It is unbelievable. So you don't have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to Responsive Classroom. You can, have some other people come up and do that training. And I think it's kind of nice for, colleagues to see colleagues. And well, I'm glad she did a great job. So, the other thing that, unfortunately, I didn't put in this plan, and I probably should have, is we are also kind of starting the district out on the, teachers' college journey. So we're actually a project school this year, which is a huge undertaking, and I'm sitting here going, I don't know why I didn't put it in the plan. But probably because my teachers are just so incredibly excited about it, and they don't see it as sort of, anything extra or daunting. And the other thing I want to say about the plan, and I know, Chris, you asked people about the buy-in of their plans, but I'm super proud of our plan, but I'm even more proud of our process that we went through to develop the plan, to then share the plan with the entire faculty, to get their feedback, and to make tweaks to the plan before it came to you today. So,
Questions, comments?
Do you think, especially at the early grades, because it's so probably mysterious, at least to me, but do you have enough diagnostics to identify students who may have some challenges in either reading or math? Do you have enough ways of collecting data without being so onerous, and do you have enough intervention strategies? Are you catching them early, if that's the right way to put it, or?
Yes,
No.
we are. So, two of the best predictors of how well a student is going to read is sort of that rapid naming of letters and sounds and phonemic awareness. And so obviously we target that right at the beginning of kindergarten and look at that. And we've sort of utilized our staff in some different ways. So we've used our speech pathologists to target some of those phonological awareness skills in kids and see how they respond to that. Even not an official intervention, but just let's take that data that we did with all of the 5 and 6 year olds and let's use it and form some small groups. We've done extra training also with our teachers and with our reading paraprofessionals that are in kindergarten, so they do additional small groups. I think we have a ton of tools, diagnostic tools, and I would say, maybe more than any other level, just because it is so granular and like the skills that the kids need to have are pretty easy to measure, and you can measure them pretty quickly. In math, we've definitely built up our toolbox. There's a math readiness assessment that all the teachers got trained on. There's also a fantastic thing called a running record in math. So it's similar to reading, and being a special ed person by trade, I thought it was the most exciting thing ever. But it kind of walks through it, and you do it one-on-one with a student, and you can get a good understanding of, oh, how did you figure that out, and are they doing their fingers, or can they tell you with metacognition, how did you think about that in your head? So I feel like we have a ton of tools.
Good.
And I think our kids who are in intervention and in special ed have made really good progress in their, in those programs. So we feel good about it.
Okay, thanks.
Can you talk a little bit about what it means to be a teacher's college project?
Well, sure. So we actually get assigned a staff developer, and so we have a staff developer, Liz Franco, who came last June and did just sort of a, little introductory session. But she comes to our school 5 days out of the year. They actually do a lot of front loading. So in October, we will have 3 days across 3 weeks. So she's coming the next 3 Tuesdays. And she does PD with the teachers, which includes kind of an overall, focus of what her lesson will be. She goes into a teacher's classroom, a lab site, and teaches a lesson, and then they come back and debrief. That's just one tiny part of it. We also have calendar days. So we have 90 calendar days where we have groups of teachers going to Teachers College for all different kinds of workshops. And so
That are amazing. The workshops are amazing. They're probably some of the best PD in the area down at Teachers College.
They are amazing.
I'm
And
jealous.
My teachers come back and they're, it's not your turn.
She didn't talk when you were talking.
She did. I know. She's so good.
Anyway, so that's been amazing. And again, they have gone in groups and they come back just so energized. I can't even tell you. We had a couple kindergarten teachers go hear about some new phonics units of instruction. And of course, they bought Mabel, who is like the little, kind of stuffed animal for the kindergarten. And so they came running back, begging to be able to pilot those phonics units. We have first grader teachers who are also piloting the phonics units. There are principals conferences that I go to. I went to my first one a couple weeks ago. We had Sheila Heen, I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she's sort of masterful on feedback. And so she gave a whole presentation. And then there's a suburban specialty group that one of my coaches and one of my teachers will be attending, that's kind of looking at small group instruction across reading, writing, and phonics. So there's so much that goes into it, but like I said, the teachers don't see it as a, oh my gosh, now I have to go. And we sort of put the calendar, the calendar days out there and said, let us know, like, what would be your first choice, second choice, third choice, and then we'll, figure out how we're gonna spend our 90 tickets. And, we have used up our tickets, and if I had more, they would for sure use them. So they're very excited. And they love Liz Franco, our staff developer, already.
That's great.
Great, thank you.
This time is listed as a barrier on just about everything. And I know that you're trying to devote meeting time and team time and collaborative time and common planning time and yada, yada, yada. So I get the challenge. My concern, or maybe it's not, is how often do we pull teachers out of the instructional day for PD? So you've got two competing wonderful needs. Do you think we're at the right balance? Do you think we pull teachers out too much? Just because I always look at instructional time as sort of sacrosanct, and I know that's an ideal. And along comes PD, we've gotta do stuff. So I don't know how you all feel about the balance, or if you're seeing any, do you think you have it right, or is it always a struggle?
I think it is a struggle. I certainly share your view that instructional time is sacrosanct. And so you always have this tension, because we sign, I suspect my colleagues do as well, you sign off on all the PD opportunities. Of course, you're assessing them against building and district goals and making sure they're the right things you're sending people off to. I personally, I have a little bit reticent around this, because I think that there are other times where teachers are out as well for a number of reasons, and it's difficult to sometimes find quality subs. So I do have a concern around the amount of time, and we know the best way to impact student learning is to have a high-quality instructor in front of the students at all times, and so I do worry about that a bit. Having said that, I look at the robust opportunities that teachers have to go out and learn, whether it's at Teachers College or an AP workshop, and bring back the learning to their colleagues and have that propagate and bring those things to scale. So I think it's always a trade-off in my personal view. It's a very good question.
We manage it, we have a database that we keep so that we know who's going where, when, and how many times people are going out, and 90 calendar days sounds like a lot, but we have 82, certified staff members in my building, so it does, it's not that they're going out a bunch of days. I will say with the Teachers College, like Jen said, do you wanna say it again?
No.
It really is amazing professional development, and it's because we're doing the units also, it's so applicable to what they're doing. But I will say, I still 100% believe that the best professional development that my classroom teachers are getting are from the coaches. And that's all job embedded, professional development. They aren't being pulled out. That is 100% the best. And when we send a group to TC, either an administrator or a coach goes with them, so that it's like so there's follow up with it. So it's hard, but yeah, good balance.
Anything else?
Yeah, I just want to follow on to what Deb said, because I said earlier at the outset that I had a comment that it crossed over all the buildings, all of the presentations, and I just highlighted there time. Okay, it was a common thread throughout all the write-ups. As I went through, I looked, all right, what are the barriers, what are the hindrances to getting all this done, and consistently is time. The plans are, they are detailed, they're extended, a lot of work went into this. I guess my challenge is to say that we always seem to be adding things to our task list anyway. And I think we've got to really maybe take a minute. All right, what are the things that we're doing that just don't need to be done anymore? Okay. What have we added what did we add 5 years ago that we're still doing that has no bearing whatsoever on our success or what we're trying to accomplish? And take a hard look at how can you get more time? because time, obviously, throughout all of these is a barrier, is an inhibitor to what you're trying to accomplish. We have a pattern, it just happens, we keep adding things onto our to-do list, or adding work.
What's the one thing that hasn't changed in public education in 100 years?
Yeah, okay,
6 hours and 35 minutes a day schedule.
yeah.
Right? What has changed? The number of demands, the number of mandates, the standards,
Exactly.
the breadth and depth of the curriculum.
So I would
Yeah.
challenge you, with your staffs, to sit down and take a good, hard look at, guys, what are we doing we just don't need to do anymore? We've got to find some time to do the things that we've said are important to us, and things that are gonna
We've tried,
move the
right?
ball down the field,
Yeah.
okay? But I'm sure
call it
that,
weeding.
We've weeded the garden.
No, we
What
didn't.
else have we done?
We tried to weed the garden.
We tried
So
to weed the garden.
We used
Admire the garden.
this is something, it's very near and dear to their hearts, to
Yeah.
mine as well, to Chuck's, if he would say so if he was here tonight.
right, I just challenge you to
Yeah,
work hard at it, because
yeah,
you get,
we accept the challenge.
yeah, they're only 8 hours in a day, or whatever the number is.
I'd like to manage expectations about results, though, because that is,
Yeah,
I mean, it's not for lack of effort.
yeah.
I do think that when you get into the classroom
There were
level,
sacred
like
cows
that
in the
vertical
garden.
articulation piece that we're working on is part of that is to see what are we spending instructional time on that
Yeah.
really could be cleared up with greater vertical articulation. And so I think weeding the garden at the course level for what we spend student minutes on is actually fertile ground, at least for us. And that's definitely part of what we're going into with this book study. I think that teacher time, we're trying to be strategic about, so some people are sort of having a focus on Ross Green, and some people are sort of having a focus on restorative practices, and so trying to, like you said, keep that spreadsheet of who's where doing what, and how can we get at the secondary level with your departments and your teams and things like that, cross-pollination, so that you've got that representative, so that when you're trying to access those experts in the building, you have them spread strategically.
Well, it seems to be a common theme, and I don't know where you're gonna buy more time. Yeah, if I could go out and buy time for you, I would do it tomorrow, okay, or I'd do it right now. But it was throughout all of your courses, I read every one of them, and time was just a common inhibitor to what you're trying to, after a lack of time. I need
Yeah.
time. So it's challenging. There's gotta be ways through technology, whatever it is, we've gotta look at finding the time to do all the things that you've laid out here so well, so clearly, and
There
I
are
just-
interesting practices that are going on in pockets all around the nation about trying to find time for teachers to work together, whether it's bringing in community partners, instead of doing the shortened day schedule, which parents hate and doesn't do much either, but bringing in community partners to have an afternoon of play or yoga or mindfulness or something done by others to free up teachers to do time on a regular basis during the year. There are lots of things that are going on. It's just a matter of will and funding and all of those things.
well, obviously this initiative goes, it was a common theme throughout all four of
Mhm.
your presentations.
I think the other way you can look at it, though, is you can kind of flip it to look at it as a positive, because if we're getting down to the point where time is the barrier, bigger things aren't barriers.
That's right.
Like, our teachers want to collaborate, so the barrier is the time. It's not that they don't want to, they just wanna shut their
Yeah.
door, or they don't wanna get along. So
Right.
part of
Oh,
it,
no.
I think, is like
Yeah.
this theme of,
That's a good problem to have.
all these other things
Yeah.
are in place, which is great, and it's sort of like, oh, if we just had a little more time. So I look at it also as a positive.
I loved your comment that the most effective professional development is coming from the coaches.
It is, 100%.
Yeah, I loved hearing that.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Okay.
Anything else? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great
A
work
lot of
going
work,
on.
very well done.
I have a friend whose daughter is a new teacher. She just took a job in teaching 8th grade in a nearby district. And I was just speaking to her this afternoon. I said, oh, well, how's she doing? Well, she was a little surprised that she's got 3 to 4 hours of work every night that she's bringing
Welcome
home.
to the
Our
profession.
teachers
So
are
just,
hard workers, they're amazing.
Our teachers, yeah. But the day doesn't end when the bus rolls out.
Please send those around, Kristen. Thanks.
Now we are turning to review and discuss enrollment projections.
Right, so the enrollment projections are hot off the press. We just received the projections from NESDEC in the mid-morning, and Lucille sent those out to you. What I sent around the table was a summary explanation of the variances between the projected and the actual, because there are variances and some of them were eyebrow raising. So I'm going to be referring to this sheet that I handed out as I just kind of talk you through what you're looking at. So first off to note is between the projection and the actual, there's a 48 student difference. So we're 48 students below what was projected. We're 84 students different from actual to actual a year ago. Okay, so
Bless
48
you.
projection to actual, bless you.
84 up or down?
We're 84 down,
Down.
right? We were originally projecting, when you go back and look at the, a much smaller variance. So I think actual to actual, we're looking at like 36. So there is a difference. Some good news, we did observe some unplanned increases at Miller Driscoll in grades K and 2. So in kindergarten, we had 16 additional students show up. In second grade, we had 8 additional students show up. You'll note I highlighted 3 grade levels in yellow, so grade 6, grade 9, grade 10. But they're not the only grade levels where there are more substantial variances. In grades 3 and 4, we also see significant variances. I didn't highlight those because they're not surprising. And they're not surprising because if you remember back, 2 years ago, we we witnessed an unplanned increase at Cider Mill to the extent where we had to hire a teacher. And so NESDEC, in their projections, picked that up. So we were watching those grade levels this summer, and when it came through in the projection, though we took the opportunity in the budget to set money aside should we need to hire an extra classroom teacher at Cider Mill, we didn't actually plan to do it, and we just chose to watch as the summer unfolded, and it turned out that those numbers didn't materialize. So that didn't surprise me. And when you go back and look at matched cohort data, you can see the consistency, and who's here corresponds to who was here a year ago. So that being said, I was surprised by the variance in grade 6, and it's not a huge difference, but it is a difference. And then looking at the variances historically, there has been in the last 10 only one other year where we saw any kind of decline in student enrollment from grade 5 to 6. In the other 9 years, it's either been flat or there's been an increase. So that's something I'm going to go back to NASDAQ and just ask about, and just try to get some thinking. Grade 7 and 8, not much to talk about there. We're +3, +2, respectively. But at Middlebrook, the total difference, where I think we were anticipating to be, at 1,009, we're actually at 1,005. So compared to a year ago, we were thinking we'd be 5 ahead. We're actually 5 below the actual. Grades 9 and 10 are a surprise. And, this again, these are grade levels. I'm going to go back and talk to the demographers at NESDEC and just try to uncover. So I was sharing with Chris when we were looking at these earlier tonight that, again, historically in those 2 grades, we see declines. And I think in grade 9, looking at over the last 10 years, I think it was like 6 or 7 out of the 9 or 10 years, there was a decline. Similarly, in grade 10, I think it was like 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, there was a decline. What's different here is the number in the decline. And so actually NESDEC did project, they did anticipate a smaller enrollment year over year, but they didn't accurately anticipate the difference. So I want to go and better understand why. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. And then grade 11, we were 3 students off the projection, and then grade 12 was flat. Moving on from there, if you kind of just go back up to the top, pre-K, in those projections we had projected 70, and that was as a result of 2 factors. One, we added a 5th classroom, and number 2, we know annually that kids age into pre-K. So we had proposed 70, we're at 63. I'm guessing by the end of the school year we'll probably be closer to 80 because of the numbers of kids that age in, and I think Bernadette shared with me earlier this week we have, 6 or 7 typicals on the waiting list already, they could probably open a 6th classroom tomorrow.
Wow.
And that's something we'll actually talk about later this year.
Wow.
And then, kind of similarly, with the Community Steps program, we had forecasted 10. We currently have 6. Andrea shared with me that she expects those other 4 will arrive as we move through the year. And then the other difference really is the sped out placements. So we're forecasting 29. We have 35, so we're 6 above what we projected. Now, my concern about the outplacements has been, where those kids are, and of the total 35, 24 of them are at the high school, and the vast majority are either in 9th or 12th grade. And so we've been talking programmatically about why we're not able to keep some of those kids in our current program, and that's why we've had conversations about an alternative high school and what other kinds of programs do we need to have in place in our continuum of services so we can hold on to them. But that's an area we're very much focused on. What else do I want to tell you? So let me just stop there, and then we can kind of look ahead at 1920. Questions, comments, reactions, thoughts?
Yeah, question. Certainly the explanations all make sense. What concerns me, I think I've asked before for this, we're trying to get some analysis or some look into it done, is the decline from 8th grade to 9th grade. Really, where did those 60 students go? Are we losing them to private schools where the parents are now having to pay property taxes and tuition? I think, and I'd asked before to have this analysis, we should know who the students are, reach out to those parents and say, what happened? Maybe they moved, but that decline, and it's just begun to happen over the last couple of years to that degree. Because
that's
if you
not
go back,
accurate, Glenn.
well, if I go back now to 2013 and 14, or 2014-15, we had 344 in 8th, we had 345 in 9th. 2015 to 16, we had 342, we dropped 15 students to 327. Then we dropped 24 students. In 17-18, we dropped 50 students, and now we've dropped 60 students. So over the last 2 years, the decline has really been dramatic, the drop-off between 8th and 9th grade. And that bothers me. We need to find out why is that happening and what's going on there. If you look back in we had 352.
I've got 10 years of actuals right in front of me.
Yeah, I'm
So
looking
I'm
at
looking
8th
at
grade
360, in 2016, we recorded as an actual 360.
to
and
336.
I'm looking at, in grade 9, 363 and 10-117. So I'll send this to you. I've got, this is something we published as part of our board.
Okay.
I think to your point, though, we can look at what the numbers are. To your point, you're right, we need to go, this is not, it's a known universe of students,
Yeah.
and we need to understand who they are and why they depart. I think what I'm seeing is there's been a pattern in place for a very long time.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
how deep is the pool, and is
Yeah.
the pool of kids that's leaving us increasing, and are there particular reasons why that are consistent? So
Well,
that's,
the same would be true, the transfer from 5th to 6th, because that's another
Yeah.
point at which kids frequently depart for private schools, right?
Yeah.
yeah, and that's, there was, in the actuals that I'm looking at, there was no discernible trend between 5th and 6th grade. I think
Which is why you're surprised with this.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, the reverse, we're adding kids in many
Oh,
years.
okay.
Yeah.
So there's not,
Yeah.
and, don't take that one way or the other. All I'm saying is there's not a discernible pattern over a decade here.
Yeah.
I know, towards the end of 8th grade or towards the end of any year, so we ask parents, what are the plans? Are you coming to the high school? What are you doing? So we ask the kindergartners, whatever. But I'm wondering if, when is that decision made in a parent's mind? I wonder if as early as 6th or 7th grade, the parent knows, I'm not sending my kid to Wilton High. You're gonna go to whatever private school. I
Could be.
just think it's something, to Glenn's point, to really delve into, when is that decision made in a family, collectively by the family, as to what high school or what middle school to be going to, and if that's something that we could address.
Yeah, we know every
That we could,
year, there's a
influence the
small
decision.
handful that go to some of the magnet schools,
Right.
AITE, some of the others, one of the magnet programs in Norwalk, attracts a couple of kids.
Global studies.
Yeah, so, but that's,
Right.
you know, maybe a handful annually, that doesn't really account for, the whole population.
I just think something we should try.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll, I will come back with better information about, who they are, where they are, and to the best extent possible over multiple years.
I had a question about community steps. This is not a dramatic number by any stretch, but don't we know how many kids we're gonna have in community steps?
Yes. Yes. When they were, the projection a year ago, they were with us. We had a student move out of town.
Okay,
We had another student who was found to be a non-resident, so they are no longer with us.
never mind.
And we have
Right,
some
right.
students whose plan is that they had to finish up some coursework at the high school this semester, and they'll be joining us in January. That was planned, it was part of it. They were in the numbers, but they needed to finish up some coursework this semester before they had completed their academic program. So there are a number of ins and outs.
Okay, I just
Related.
had thought the program was actually gonna grow.
It is.
So this is like a rolling admission kind of thing, as
Yes,
the year progresses, it will
yes.
grow, okay.
Kind of like kindergarten, or pre-K.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, in and out through the course of the year.
So just a couple of notes, looking forward now, so 1920, and you have it, so you can take a look at your leisure, but, in terms of, you know, so this is, it's just the, in that projection, Deb, it's the 1920 projection, so those are the numbers we'll use as we're building the budget proposal. So when we're looking at total classroom enrollment, NESDEC was forecasting only a reduction of 35. And so within that, there was a suggested increase at Miller Driscoll, a slight decline, I think, of about 8 students at Cider Mill. There's a more modest decline that we're going to observe at Middlebrook, and that's really the beginning of the wave for that school, because we're replacing classes that have, you know, in recent years been in the 300s with classes that are now in the 200s. And so that's, you know, we'll be working with Lauren and company to understand the structure and, you know, what do we need to happen at that school in terms of the team approach, which is very different than an elementary model, in response to smaller cohorts of kids coming through. So this board will have some decision-making to do with the administrators in the next 3 years as we have that wave kind of wash through, and the new normal becomes, you know, classes of 200 instead of 300. And then at the high school, NESDEC was again forecasting a slight increase. So I think, you know, the other question that we need to look at, given some of the variances here, is how confident are we in these numbers and in the numbers of produced by NESDEC. So I think once we get some better answers to these questions in grades 6, 9, and 10, we'll have a better understanding of that. All right.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, John, did you?
No.
Okay. Moving on to action items, discuss and approve the WPS district calendars 2019-20 and 2020-21. Before we bring these up, well, maybe we'll bring them up and then I'll say something. Is there a motion to approve the district calendars? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All I wanted to add was that we did receive comments from the public about this, and I think every single one had a different idea on how the calendar should be amended. And we read everything and we listen to what everybody has to say. And I think we said it at the last meeting, but I just really want everyone to understand that the calendar is very much a compromise between what we perceive as the preferences of the community and academics and our teachers. And like, for example, Columbus Day has for as long as I've been on the board and Lori's been on the board, every year somebody has said, why don't we just have school on Columbus Day? The answer is because it's a compromise with our teachers union. They've given us something else that we've wanted, you know, so we have school on Columbus, or, you know, we have a professional development this year on Columbus Day. So please know, members of the community, that there is no such thing as a perfect calendar. Instead, we build a document that best meets the needs of academics, and hopefully it doesn't inconvenience our families too much, but keep in mind that it is a compromise. So with that, any other comments or anything?
Just a question about printing, and it's probably because I'm reading it wrong, but Thanksgiving recess, the calendar itself,
You're
there's.
looking at November 2019?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the Thanksgiving recess is the 27th through the 29th, but the calendar itself doesn't show that day. Am I reading that
Oh.
wrong?
No,
The 27th
we're
should be-
closed on the 27th, the Wednesday the 27th.
So that's in the,
Right,
that
so
should be
that's
red.
in
That's
red.
That should be
Yeah.
red.
Yeah, there's inconsistencies.
Yeah, so
between
there's
the
just,
two
there's just a
years and what's
typo
read.
then. You see the actual calendar, the 27th
no
isn't.
red.
Are you
Right.
looking-
That's
here.
all.
Just not
Okay.
printed in red.
It's just not printed.
So the text is accurate.
The text
On
is
the side.
accurate, but the actual calendar, little grid.
In the block.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, it's shaded in blue as a closed day.
It
Yeah.
is?
Yep. At least that's the one I'm looking at.
What's-
Oh, it might be the print then, because
You might have a,
it's not, we
but
don't
then the
have blue.
28th and 29th was written in red,
Yeah.
and 27 is written in black.
Yep. So, I mean,
Okay.
do we know why it's not in red?
I'll take a quick look, I don't
Okay.
know.
She ran out
Probably
of
because we went back and
Crayolas
forth
that
with the
day.
day a few times, so if I have to make the
Yeah, it's the
twenty-seventh
same in,
in red, I
same in
will, and
2020.
that's probably.
And the
Same
same
in
in
2020.
2020 as
Okay.
well.
Yeah,
So
just to
with
make it
those-
clarified, that's
That's
all.
like a typo thing.
Exactly.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? The calendars are approved. Thank you very
For
much.
now.
Take another crack at it
Noting
next
that
year.
Yeah.
obviously revisions can be made.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah,
as we
if,
see fit.
God.
So nothing's really
What
not
do we
there.
have?
No, I don't. My daughter's graduating this year, I don't care.
Future
Doesn't
business,
affect me.
we have, the class size report, we received this week. Is that on the website?
So, I don't think it's been posted yet, but we'll have that on the November 1st agenda for review and discuss.
Yeah,
So,
and
all
any
the-
members of the community listening, that's a really interesting document if you wanna take a look at that. And also please note that our regular scheduled meeting, which would be October 25th, has been pushed back a week to November 1. So we'll meet on November 1 and then November 8, which of course is our community budget workshop. At this point, are there any members of the community who would like to come forward and offer any comments? Seeing no one, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And would,